The rumble of Harley-Davidson engines shattered the morning quiet outside Sunrise Diner. Four motorcycles gleaming black in the October rain pulled up to the curb in perfect formation. Steam rose from the wet asphalt as their engines cut, leaving behind an expectant silence. Inside the diner, the needle on the Wurlitzer jukebox scratched across Born to be Wild before falling silent. Every head turned toward the entrance. Frank Sullivan, retired police chief of Millridge, for 27 years, lowered his newspaper and removed his reading glasses. His weathered hand instinctively moved toward his hip, where his service revolver once rested. The bell above the door chimed as it swung open. Four men in black leather jackets entered, water glistening on their shoulders. Their leader stood a head taller than the rest, with a salt and pepper beard cascading down his chest and tattoos climbing up his neck. Dog tags hung against his chest. His eyes, hidden behind dark sunglasses despite the gloomy morning, scanned the room with practiced precision. Emma Porter felt her throat tighten as the man removed his sunglasses and locked eyes with her. She clutched the coffee pot tighter, her knuckles whitening. At 24, she had learned to handle difficult customers at Sunrise Diner, but something about these men made her blood run cold. The leader strode directly toward her, his heavy boots echoing on the checkered floor. The other three men flanked him, spreading throughout the diner like a tactical unit, each securing territory. "Are you Emma Porter?" The man's voice was deep, authoritative, but surprisingly soft. Emma nodded, unable to find her voice. "My name is Mason Richards," he said. "We need to talk about Walter Bishop." The coffee pot nearly slipped from Emma's grip. Walter Bishop, the old man at table 5 who hadn't shown up this morning. For the first time in over a year. Millridge, Pennsylvania wasn't what it used to be. Once a thriving steel town, it now wore the pallor of industrial decay. Abandoned factories stood as monuments to better times, their smokestacks reaching toward the sky like desperate fingers. The Millridge Steel Mill had closed in '82, taking with it over 2,000 jobs in the town's beating heart. Sunrise Diner remained one of the few constants. The neon sign had illuminated the corner of Elm and Main since 1952, surviving economic booms and busts, watching presidents come and go, a witness to history in faded chrome and red vinyl. Inside, time seemed suspended. The black and white floor tiles, the gleaming countertop, the vintage jukebox playing Elvis and Buddy Holly, all preserved as if in amber. For Emma Porter, the diner represented both sanctuary and prison. She moved between tables with practiced grace, balancing plates along her arm, refilling coffee cups without being asked, smiling through exhaustion. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, her face fresh and pretty without makeup, her green eyes holding dreams larger than this small town could contain. 3 years earlier, she had been a promising art student with a full scholarship to the Philadelphia Academy of Fine Arts. Then her mother was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. The medical bills mounted. Her father had vanished years before leaving them to face adversity alone. Emma withdrew from school, moved back to Millridge, and took the only job available, waitressing at Sunrise. "Order up," Max Callahan's gruff voice called from the kitchen window, startling Emma from her thoughts. Max owned the diner, or so everyone thought until recently. At 62, the former Marine still moved with military precision. His buzzed gray hair and perpetually straight posture spoke of his 20 years in the Corps. Desert Storm had been his final deployment before returning to Millridge to buy the diner from the original owner. A small American flag pin always adorned his white apron. "Emma, table 7's getting cold," Max barked. "Coming, Nishoy." Emma grabbed the plates, smiling apologetically at the customers waiting. Diana Reeves watched from behind the counter with a scowl etched into her face. After 30 years at Sunrise, Diana had perfected the art of efficiency without warmth. In her mid-50s, with bottle red hair and reading glasses on a chain around her neck, she wore her bitterness like armor. A small gold locket containing her son's picture never left her neck, her boy, who never came back from Grenada in '83. "You're too slow today, girl," Diana muttered as Emma passed. "This ain't no charity case. These people want their food hot." Emma bit her tongue. Diana had been particularly sharp since learning that Emma was now technically her boss. The news that Walter Bishop, the quiet old man who sat in booth 5 every morning, had actually purchased the diner 6 months ago had shocked everyone. That he'd left it to Emma in his will had seemed like a cruel joke to Diana. But Walter Bishop had been no ordinary customer. The first time he appeared at Sunrise Diner was exactly 13 months ago. October 12th, Emma remembered because it was her mother's birthday, and she'd been distracted, worried about the home health aide being late. The bell chimed at precisely 7:15 a.m. An elderly man stepped inside, carefully closing the door behind him. He wore a faded tweed jacket with leather patches at the elbows, pressed gray slacks, and scuffed but meticulously polished Oxford shoes. Half-moon glasses perched on his aquiline nose. His wispy white hair was combed neatly to the side, and he carried the Wall Street Journal tucked under his arm. Without acknowledging anyone, he walked directly to booth 5 in the far corner, sliding onto the vinyl seat with a sigh that seemed to contain volumes. He placed his newspaper on the table along with a fountain pen and small leather-bound notebook. Emma approached with a menu and coffee pot. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Sunrise. Can I start you with some coffee?" The man didn't look up. His hands, Emma noticed, trembled slightly as he opened his newspaper. Age spots dotted his skin, and blue veins mapped the backs of his hands like rivers. "Coffee, black, and whatever your breakfast special is." His voice was quiet but clear-cultured, different from the local accent. "Coming right up," Emma said cheerfully, pouring his coffee. As she walked away, Max pulled her aside. "That's Walter Bishop," he whispered. "Used to be someone important. Government man, I think. Keeps to himself now. Just give him his food and leave him be." "Why booth 5?" Emma asked. "It's the least comfortable one in the diner." Max shrugged. "Best sight line to the door in the kitchen. Old habits die hard for some folks." That first morning, Walter ate methodically, reading his paper and occasionally making notes in his little book. He left exactly $12.57, the cost of his meal, plus an 18% tip calculated to the penny. No more, no less. The next day he returned at exactly 7:15. And the next. And the next. For a month their interaction remained the same. Walter ordered without looking at her. Emma served him with a smile he never saw. But she noticed things: how his hands shook more on some days than others, how he squinted at the menu despite his glasses, how meticulously he arranged his silverware. Then one morning she saw him struggling to cut his toast. His fingers couldn't grip the knife properly, and frustration flashed across his face, the first real emotion she'd seen him display. Without a word, Emma took the knife from his hand. "Let me help you with that." She cut the toast into 4 perfect triangles, then placed the knife back beside his plate. For the first time, Walter looked directly at her. His eyes were pale blue and surprisingly sharp, assessing her with an intelligence that made Emma stand straighter. He gave a single curt nod before returning to his paper. The next day, Emma cut his toast without being asked, and the day after that, it became their silent ritual. Soon she began timing his coffee refills perfectly, bringing them just as he reached the bottom of his cup. She learned to recognize the small signs of his Parkinson's disease flaring up and would adjust accordingly, cutting his food into smaller pieces on bad days, bringing a straw without being asked. One morning, feeling bold, she began talking to him, not expecting responses, just filling the silence as she poured his coffee or delivered his food. "My mom had a rough night," she said one day. "The new medication makes her nauseous, but the doctor says it might slow the progression of her MS." Another time, "I found some of my old sketches last night from art school. It's strange to see what you are capable of and know you might never get back there." Walter never replied, but Emma sensed he was listening. His eyes would pause their scanning of the newspaper when she spoke. Sometimes his pen would stop moving in his notebook. Then one rainy Tuesday, 6 months after he first appeared, Walter forgot his umbrella. Emma noticed it leaning against the booth after he left. She ran out into the downpour, calling after him. "Mr. Bishop, your umbrella?" He turned, already soaked, his white hair plastered to his forehead. Taking the umbrella, he studied her face as rain streamed down his own. "You have talent," he said suddenly. Emma blinked in surprise. "Excuse me. I've seen you sketching on your breaks, on napkins, receipt backs. You have a good eye for composition. Don't waste it like I did." Before she could respond, he opened the umbrella and walked away, leaving Emma standing in the rain, stunned by the most words he'd ever spoken to her. After that day, their silent understanding deepened. Walter began leaving his small leather notebook open while he read his paper. Emma realized he was sketching quick, deft drawings of the diner's patrons. Despite his trembling hands, the lines were confident, capturing essence rather than detail. "You're an artist," she said one morning, refilling his coffee. Walter closed the notebook quickly. Was a lifetime ago. Walter Bishop had indeed been many things in his lifetime. Born in 1925 to a modest family in Connecticut, he demonstrated artistic talent from an early age. His drawings caught the attention of a local patron who funded his education at Yale's art program. But Walter's studies were interrupted by World War II, where his artistic abilities proved unexpectedly valuable in military intelligence. He could create detailed sketches of targets from verbal descriptions, reproduce documents from memory-forged signatures in official papers. After the war, his talents transferred naturally to the newly formed CIA. Throughout the Cold War, Walter Bishop became a legend in intelligence circles, the man who could draw a face from a witness description so accurately that Soviet agents would be identified and captured. In 1962, during the tension of the Cuban Missile Crisis, Walter sat in a nondescript room at Langley, sketching the face of a suspected KGB officer based on a glimpse a diplomat had caught at a party in Havana. His hand moved across the paper with certainty, each stroke adding dimension and character to the face emerging on the page. "How do you do that?" asked a young analyst watching him work. "Create something so precise from such vague descriptions." Walter didn't look up. "I don't draw what people tell me they saw. I draw what they don't realize they saw. The human eye captures everything. The human mind filters most of it out. I listen for the details they mention in passing the ones they think unimportant. Those are usually the most accurate." It was this attention to detail, this ability to see what others missed, that made Walter Bishop both a brilliant intelligence officer and a lonely man. He noticed too much, understood too deeply the duplicity and frailty of human nature. In 1968, Walter's life changed when he met Elizabeth Collins at a gallery showing in Georgetown. She was vibrant and genuine in a world of political calculation. A successful restaurateur with a small chain of diners called Lizzie's Home Cooking, Elizabeth brought warmth and spontaneity to Walter's carefully ordered existence. They married in 1970, a May wedding with cherry blossoms drifting across the Potomac. Elizabeth expanded her restaurant business while Walter continued his work at the CIA. They had one son, Robert, born in 1971, who grew up between his father's world of secrets and his mother's world of hospitality and openness. Then came October 17, 1978. Elizabeth was driving to inspect a new restaurant location when her brakes failed on a rain-slicked mountain road. The official report called it a tragic accident. Walter knew better. 3 weeks earlier, Elizabeth had confided her suspicions about Joseph Vance, a corporate raider who had been pressuring her to sell her successful restaurant chain. She discovered some of his other acquisitions had suffered mysterious accidents or health code violations until they sold at reduced prices. The police found no evidence of foul play in Elizabeth's accident. The brake lines had failed due to normal wear and tear. But Walter Bishop had spent a lifetime detecting patterns others missed. He resigned from the CIA the day after Elizabeth's funeral. Within a year, he had leveraged their savings and Elizabeth's insurance money into a series of strategic investments. Bishop Enterprises was born not from entrepreneurial passion, but from cold, calculated vengeance. Over the next 20 years, Walter systematically acquired companies connected to Vance Industries. He dismantled some, used others as vehicles to purchase even more Vance-adjacent businesses. His goal was never wealth accumulation, but the slow, methodical destruction of Joseph Vance's empire. Robert Bishop followed in his father's footsteps, joining Bishop Enterprises after college. He married Catherine, a sharp-minded businesswoman from a prominent family, and they had a son, Nathan, in 1968. But Robert never truly understood his father's obsession with destroying Vance. When Robert died unexpectedly of a heart attack in 1990, it left a void in the family. Walter, consumed by his vendetta, had little time for his grieving daughter-in-law or his 22-year-old grandson. Catherine took over Robert's responsibilities at Bishop Enterprises, determined to preserve her husband's legacy, while young Nathan grew increasingly resentful of the grandfather who seemed to care more about revenge than family. By the time Walter Bishop first walked into Sunrise Diner in Millridge, Pennsylvania, he had amassed billions, destroyed Vance Industries, and watched Joseph Vance die bankrupt and disgraced. But victory brought no satisfaction. Walter found himself alone at 72, his life's mission complete with nothing but empty rooms filled with art he collected because Elizabeth once loved it. The rain was coming down harder now, as Emma stared through the diner window, watching for Walter's familiar figure. The clock read 7:32 a.m. Walter was never late. In over a year, he had arrived at precisely 7:15 every morning, regardless of weather or season. "He's not coming," Diana said, sliding past with a coffee pot. "Maybe the old man finally kicked it." "Diana," Emma frowned. "Don't say that." Frank Sullivan folded his newspaper and signaled for a refill. The former police chief had been coming to Sunrise since before Emma was born. His weathered face had seen everything Millridge had to offer, good and bad. "Bishop's been looking worse lately," Frank commented as Emma poured his coffee. "Parkinson's getting to him. My brother had it. Nasty business." Emma bit her lip. "He left his medication yesterday. I was going to give it back to him this morning." She pulled an orange prescription bottle from her apron pocket. Frank's bushy eyebrows rose. "That's not good. Those meds need to be taken regular." "Maybe I should call someone, check on him," Emma suggested. "And who would you call?" Diana snorted from behind the counter. "None of us know anything about him, except he likes his toast cut up and his coffee black." Max emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "Have it be, Emma. Men like Bishop value their privacy. He's got people looking after him." "What do you mean, men like Bishop?" Emma asked. "What do you know about him, Max?" Max's expression closed. "Just that he's not someone who needs a waitress checking up on him." Let it go. But Emma couldn't let it go. Throughout the morning, she found herself glancing at booth 5, expecting to see Walter's stooped figure hunched over his newspaper. The empty booth seemed to grow larger as the hours passed, a void that drew her attention again and again. During her break, she called her mother's nurse to check in, then walked to the newspaper stand outside. She scanned the Millridge Gazette for any mention of Walter Bishop. Nothing. The afternoon brought a fresh wave of rain drumming against the windows as the lunch crowd thinned. Emma was wiping down the counter when Frank approached, settling his bill. "You really worried about the old man, aren't you?" he asked, watching her glance again at booth 5. Emma shrugged. "He's never missed a day. And with his medication here." Frank sighed, lowering his voice. "Look, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Bishop isn't just some retired old fellow. He's got connections. Deep ones." "What kind of connections?" Frank adjusted his jacket. "The kind that mean you should mind your own business. Bishop has made enemies over the years. Powerful ones. Whatever's happened to him, if anything has, it's not something you want to get mixed up in." "But—" "No buts, Emma. You're a good kid with a lot on your plate already. Your mom needs you. This town needs this diner. Don't go looking for trouble." With that, Frank left his usual generous tip and headed for the door. As he reached for the handle, the rumble of motorcycle engines filled the air outside. Frank froze his hand, dropping to his hip in an old lawman's instinct. The door swung open. 4 bikers in rain-slicked leather stood framed in the doorway. The leader, massive with a full beard and intense eyes, surveyed the diner before his gaze settled on Emma. The entire diner fell silent. Max emerged from the kitchen, his stance widening subtly into a fighting position Emma had never seen before. The lead biker stepped forward, his boots leaving wet prints on the floor. The 3 men behind him spread out, positioning themselves strategically around the diner. "Emma Porter," the bearded man asked, his voice surprisingly gentle for his intimidating appearance. Emma stepped forward, clutching her serving tray like a shield. "Yes. My name is Mason Richards." He removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes that had seen too much. "I need to talk to you about Walter Bishop." Before Emma could respond, the door opened again. A distinguished older man in an impeccable charcoal suit entered, shaking water from his umbrella. Silver-haired and sharp-eyed, he carried a leather briefcase that looked worth more than Emma's monthly rent. "Miss Porter," he said with a slight bow. "Marcus Reed, senior partner at Blackwood, Reed & Hamilton. I represent the estate of Walter Bishop." Emma's heart sank. The estate, not Walter himself. She began, her voice catching. "Mr. Bishop passed away peacefully in his sleep last night." Reed said, his tone professional but not unkind. His final instructions were most specific. "I need you to come with me immediately for the reading of his will." Diana dropped a coffee mug. The sound of it shattering seemed to echo through the diner. "His will," Emma repeated numbly. "But I barely knew him. I just served his breakfast." Reed's expression remained impassive. "Nevertheless, Mr. Bishop named you specifically. His instructions were, and I quote, 'Bring the young woman who cuts my toast without being asked.' That would be you, Miss Porter." Frank stepped between them. "Now hold on. You can't just walk in here and take her away. Who are these men? He gestured to the bikers. Mason Richards produced an ID card. We were Mr. Bishop's security detail. We're here to escort Miss Porter safely. Max approached, wiping his hands on his apron. His eyes locked with Mason's in silent recognition. It's okay, Frank, Max said quietly. I know Mason. We served together in Beirut in '83. Special operations. Emma will be safe with him. Emma looked at Max in confusion. You know them, Mato? Max's expression grew solemn. There's a lot you don't know, Emma, about Walter, about this place. He sighed heavily. Walter bought this diner for me 8 months ago after observing you for several weeks. I've been working as manager, not owner, ever since. He wanted to understand who you were, what kind of person you might be. The floor seemed to shift under Emma's feet. What? Why me? That, Reed interjected smoothly, is what the will reading will explain. If you'll come with us, Miss Porter, a car is waiting. Emma looked around the diner at Max's resigned expression, Diana's shocked face, Frank's concern, and the 4 imposing bikers now forming a protective circle around her. I need to get my purse, she said weakly. Of course, Reed nodded. Mr. Richards and his men will escort you home afterward if you wish to change before the reading. We're headed to the Bishop Enterprises headquarters downtown. Emma untied her apron with trembling fingers, hanging it on the hook behind the counter. The weight of every eye in the diner pressed upon her as she walked to the break room to retrieve her belongings. When she returned, Max was waiting by the door. Emma, he said quietly, whatever happens next. Walter Bishop was a complicated man, but he saw something in you that the rest of us missed. Trust that. Outside, a sleek black Lincoln town car idled at the curb surrounded by 4 Harley-Davidsons. The rain had slowed to a drizzle and weak sunlight struggled through the clouds. As Mason Richards held the car door open for her, Emma glanced back at Sunrise Diner. Through the window, she could see Booth 5 empty now and likely to remain so. Something about the sight made her chest tighten with grief for a man she'd barely known. She slid into the plush leather back seat beside Marcus Reed. As the car pulled away from the curb, the motorcycles fell into formation around it, 2 in front, 2 behind. A presidential escort for a waitress from Millridge. Mr. Reed, Emma said, finding her voice at last, please tell me what's happening. Why would Walter Bishop include me in his will? Why did he buy the diner? Why did he have security guards who look like they belong in a biker gang? Reed opened his briefcase and removed a thick file. Miss Porter Walter Bishop was worth approximately $4 billion at the time of his death. He owned controlling interests in over 30 companies, a significant real estate portfolio, and one of the finest private art collections in the country. Emma stared at him in disbelief. The old man in Booth 5 was a billionaire. Indeed. Reed's expression softened slightly. And for reasons you'll soon understand, you were very important to him. The car turned onto the highway leading to downtown Millridge. Ahead, the glass tower of Bishop Enterprises reflected the breaking sunlight gleaming like a beacon above the struggling town. Emma Porter, who had never left Millridge, who had abandoned her dreams to care for her mother, who had spent 3 years serving coffee and cutting toast, was about to enter a world she couldn't begin to imagine. And somewhere in that world were answers about Walter Bishop, quiet old man who had seen something in her worth remembering in his final testament. As the motorcycles roared around them, Emma clutched the orange bottle of Parkinson's medication still in her pocket, a small tangible connection to Walter that now felt like both a talisman and a key to mysteries she hadn't known existed until this rain-soaked morning. The Bishop Enterprises building loomed closer, its glass facade reflecting clouds and possibilities. Emma Porter drew a deep breath. Whatever waited for her inside whatever Walter Bishop had planned, she would face it with the same quiet dignity she'd shown him every morning for the past year. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create ripples that change lives forever. Emma was about to discover just how far those ripples could reach. The opulent lobby of Bishop Enterprises made Emma acutely aware of her waitress uniform. Marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. Security guards in tailored suits monitored entrances with subtle efficiency. Mason and his bikers, leather creaking as they moved, created a surreal contrast against the corporate polish. The executive elevator whisked them to the top floor. As the doors opened, Emma found herself facing a reception area where a striking woman in her 60s and a younger man in an expensive suit waited. "What is this?" the woman demanded, her voice sharp with authority. "Marcus, explain yourself. Why have you brought help to my husband's will reading?" "Catherine," Reed replied calmly, "this is Miss Emma Porter. She's named explicitly in Walter's will." The younger man laughed incredulously. The waitress grandfather really did lose his mind at the end. Reed's expression remained professionally neutral. "Miss Porter, allow me to introduce Catherine Bishop, Walter's daughter-in-law, and Nathan Bishop, his grandson." Nathan Bishop's handsome face twisted with contempt as he looked Emma up and down. "So you're the charity case we've been kept waiting for. What did you do, bring the old man extra jam packets?" Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks, but before she could respond, Mason stepped forward, his massive presence suddenly menacing. "Mr. Bishop," he said quietly, "I'd recommend speaking respectfully to Miss Porter. Your grandfather would have expected it." Nathan's eyes widened slightly, but he recovered quickly. "Are we allowing the help's bodyguards to threaten family members now, Marcus?" "This is outrageous," Reed sighed. "The boardroom is ready. Shall we proceed?" As they walked down the hallway, Emma noticed the artwork on the walls, original paintings she recognized from her art history classes. Wyeth, Hopper, O'Keeffe. Millions of dollars in American masterpieces displayed as casually as family photos. The boardroom door opened to reveal a massive mahogany table surrounded by leather chairs. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Millridge, the struggling downtown, the shuttered steel mill, and beyond them, barely visible in the distance, the neon sign of Sunrise Diner at 152 Elm Street. Emma took a seat far from Catherine and Nathan, grateful when Mason positioned himself behind her chair. Reed arranged documents at the head of the table, the deliberate movements of a man accustomed to handling delicate situations. "Now that all parties named in the primary codicil are present," Reed began, "we can proceed with the reading of Walter Bishop's last will and testament." Emma listened in a daze as Reed recited legal language, establishing trust endowments to charities, bequests to foundations. The sums mentioned seemed abstract, millions flowing to causes and institutions Emma had never heard of. Then Reed paused, looking directly at Catherine and Nathan. "To my daughter-in-law, Catherine Bishop, and my grandson, Nathan Bishop, I leave the contents of the Bishop Family Trust as contractually obligated by pre-existing family arrangements. This amounts to a principal sum of $10 million each." $10 million, Nathan exploded, leaping to his feet. "That's it. The company is worth billions. Your grandfather liquidated the majority of his personal assets over the last 2 years," Reed explained coolly. "What he did with his personal fortune was and is his own prerogative. He owed it to us." Catherine snapped, her composure cracking. "We're his family." Reed continued reading as if there had been no interruption. "All remaining personal effects properties and the controlling interest in Bishop Enterprises are to be dealt with as follows." He turned a page. Emma held her breath. "And now," Reed said, looking over his glasses directly at Emma, "we come to the final provision." The tension in the room was palpable. Nathan leaned forward, his knuckles white against the polished table. Catherine's face had frozen into a mask of controlled fury. Reed read from the will. "To Miss Emma Porter, the young woman at Sunrise Diner, who showed an old man kindness when she had no reason to, who treated me with dignity when others saw only a nuisance, and who without fail cut my toast because she noticed my hands trembled." Emma's eyes filled with tears. He had noticed everything. "To Miss Porter," Reed continued, "I leave a legacy of kindness returned. First, I bequeath to her the sum of $250,000 to be transferred immediately to ease her burdens as she once eased mine." Emma gasped. The room tilted. $250,000. It would pay for her mother's care for years. It would clear her debts. It was a miracle. "What?" Nathan exploded, leaping to his feet. "He's giving $250,000 to a hash slinger. We'll contest this." He was clearly not of sound mind. "Please sit down, Mr. Bishop," Reed said, his voice dropping to an icy calm. "I am not finished." Nathan stared, then slowly sank back into his chair, his face flushed with rage. Reed adjusted his glasses and read the final sentence. "And finally, because it was the last place on earth where I felt seen not as a source of wealth but as a human being, I leave to Miss Emma Porter in its entirety the property and business known as Sunrise Diner, located at 152 Elm Street, which I purchased 8 months ago through a subsidiary company. Silence. A thick, profound silence filled the boardroom. Emma just stared, her mind unable to process the words. The diner. He bought the diner for her. Then Nathan started to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was sharp, ugly, incredulous. The diner, he leaves her a greasy spoon. Oh, that's rich. After all that buildup, he leaves the waitress her own cage. Grandfather really did have a twisted sense of humor. But Marcus Reed wasn't smiling. He closed the will, removed his glasses, and looked at Emma with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. It was a mix of pity, respect, and warning. There is one more thing, Miss Porter, he said, his voice low. Included with the diner is the small investment portfolio Mr. Bishop attached to the business to ensure its long-term viability and provide for capital improvements. It is currently valued at approximately $5 million. The laughter died in Nathan's throat. His face went from red to a sickly pale white. Catherine's perfectly manicured hand flew to her mouth. Emma felt the floor drop out from under her. $5 million, the diner. It wasn't a cage, it was a kingdom. The grumpy, silent old man she had served coffee to the man she felt sorry for wasn't just wealthy. He was Walter Bishop, founder of Bishop Enterprises, a corporate titan, a king of industry, who had hidden in plain sight. And he had just handed her, a broke art student, slinging hash in a greasy spoon, the keys to a new life. A life that, judging by the murderous look in Nathan Bishop's eyes, was about to become very, very dangerous. Leaving the boardroom felt like escaping a pressure chamber. Emma breathed deeply as Mason guided her toward the elevator, his massive frame shielding her from the venomous stares of the Bishop family. Catherine sat frozen in her chair, face pale with shock. Nathan had stormed out moments earlier, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass wall panels. Marcus Reed followed Emma into the hallway, leather briefcase tucked under his arm. Miss Porter, Mr. Bishop anticipated strong reactions to his decisions. These documents require your immediate attention. He handed her a thick folder stamped with the law firm's gold-embossed seal. A financial advisor will contact you tomorrow. Until then, do not speak with anyone about the inheritance, especially the Bishops. Emma clutched the folder to her chest like a shield. I don't understand any of this. Why me? Why would Walter leave me anything, let alone millions of dollars? Reed adjusted his silver cufflinks, a gesture that spoke of decades managing delicate situations. Mr. Bishop was a complex man with specific reasons for every decision. The answers you seek are waiting at his residence. He produced an old brass key from his pocket. Walter instructed me to give you this. It opens his private study in Mahasmilraj of Bishtim. Mason will take you there now. The elevator doors opened. Emma stepped inside, followed by Mason and two of his men. As the doors began to close, Nathan Bishop appeared at the end of the hallway, face contorted with fury. This isn't over, he shouted, striding toward them. You think you can walk in here and take what belongs to my family? I'll bury you in litigation until you're back serving coffee. Mason stepped forward, positioning himself between Emma and Nathan, just as the door slid shut, cutting off the tirade mid-sentence. Don't worry about him, Mason said, his deep voice surprisingly gentle. Walter knew exactly what he was doing. Emma looked up at the imposing biker. Did you work for Walter long? A ghost of a smile crossed Mason's weathered face. 30 years, since Beirut, 1983. That's when Max mentioned you served together. Max Callahan was the best combat medic I ever knew. Saved my life twice in that hellhole. Walter pulled us both out when things went sideways on an operation the government later denied ever happened. Mason's eyes clouded with old memories. 4 of us got left behind. Walter found us, brought us home, gave us new identities and purpose when our country abandoned us. Max chose a quieter life. I stayed with Walter. The elevator reached the underground parking garage where 3 Harleys waited alongside a gleaming black Cadillac. The 4th biker was already there, engine idling. Ray will take point, Mason instructed the others. Hank Cooper, you cover our 6. Nathan might try something stupid. He turned to Emma. You ride with me, Miss Porter. The car's too easy to follow. Emma stared at the motorcycle. I've never been on one of these. Just hold on tight, Mason said, handing her a helmet. Walter's penthouse is across town. Best you see it now before the lawyers seal it up for inventory. The motorcycle rumbled beneath Emma as they navigated through downtown Millridge. The vibration traveled up through her bones, an alien sensation that matched her disorientation. 24 hours ago, she had been worried about paying her mother's medical bills. Now she was worth millions, riding with an ex-Navy SEAL to the secret residence of a billionaire who had, for reasons still unknown, chosen her as his unlikely heir. They turned onto Park Avenue, the wealthiest street in Millridge, lined with pre-war limestone buildings that had housed steel magnates during the town's golden era. Mason pulled up before the most impressive building, a 12-story Art Deco masterpiece with a marble facade and brass-trimmed revolving doors. A uniformed doorman rushed forward as they dismounted. "Mr. Richards," he nodded respectfully to Mason. Mr. Reed called ahead. "Please, this way." The lobby gleamed with polished marble and mahogany, dominated by a central fountain where water cascaded over sculpted bronze figures. The elevator was a work of art itself, paneled in burled walnut, with intricate brass filigree doors that closed with barely a whisper. Walter maintained residence in both New York and here in Millridge, Mason explained as they ascended. The Manhattan apartment was for business, but this penthouse was his true sanctuary. No family allowed, not even Catherine. After discovering Millridge and the diner, he spent most of his time here. The elevator opened directly into a foyer larger than Emma's entire apartment. Her first step onto the herringbone hardwood floor was hesitant, as if crossing an invisible boundary into Walter's private world. What struck her immediately wasn't the luxury, but the art. Every wall displayed museum-quality paintings. American masters dominated Winslow Homer, seascapes, Edward Hopper cityscapes, Georgia O'Keeffe, flowers blazing with color. A small Thomas Hart Benton depicted rural life during the Depression, farmers with weathered faces working land that seemed both bountiful and cruel. "My God," Emma breathed, art school training kicking in despite her shock. "That's an original Wyeth." Mason nodded. "Walter collected American art exclusively, said it told the real story of our country better than any history book." Moving deeper into the apartment, Emma found herself in a great room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Millridge. The furniture was elegant but understated, more comfortable than ostentatious. A crystal tumbler sat on a side table beside a leather armchair, a finger of amber liquid still inside, as if Walter had just stepped away for a moment. "The study is this way," Mason directed, leading her down a long hallway lined with black and white photographs. Emma slowed, examining them carefully. They documented moments in American history, civil rights marches, moon landings, presidential inaugurations, moments of triumph and tragedy, captured with exceptional clarity. "Did Walter take these?" she asked. "No, but he knew many of the photographers. Said these images were America's true family album." At the end of the hallway stood a heavy oak door, weathered and out of place among the penthouse's refined decor. It looked like it belonged in a rural farmhouse or a frontier cabin, not a billionaire's residence. A simple brass lock plate waited for the key Reed had given her. "I'll wait out here," Mason said, taking up position beside the door. "Some things Walter wanted only for you." The key turned with a satisfying click. Emma pushed the door open and stepped across another threshold into Walter Bishop's inner sanctum. Unlike the restrained elegance of the rest of the penthouse, the study was gloriously cluttered, almost chaotic. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves sagged under the weight of leather-bound volumes. Maps and charts covered one wall, pinned with colored markers and connected by red strings. A massive oak desk dominated the center of the room, its surface buried under stacks of papers, notebooks, and newspaper clippings. The air smelled of pipe tobacco, old books, and something indefinable that reminded Emma of the diner early in the morning, a mixture of coffee and possibility. But what drew Emma's attention was the wall behind the desk. Unlike the orderly art displays throughout the penthouse, this wall told a story through organized chaos. Hundreds of photographs, documents, and handwritten notes were pinned to a massive corkboard connected by colored strings in a complex web that spanned on decades. At the center was a faded photograph of a beautiful woman with kind eyes and an infectious smile standing proudly in front of a small diner with a sign reading "Lizzie's Home Cooking." Emma moved closer, studying the woman's face. There was something familiar about her, a warmth that resonated deep within Emma's memory. Surrounding this central image were newspaper clippings that told a fragmented story. Restaurateur Elizabeth Bishop dies in tragic accident. Bishop Enterprises acquires Vance Holdings in hostile takeover. Corporate raider Joseph Vance found dead in apparent suicide. Handwritten notes in Walter's distinctive script filled the spaces between decades of investigation documented in fading ink. Emma traced the strings connecting the various elements, understanding slowly dawning as she pieced together Walter's life work. Elizabeth Bishop had been Walter's wife. Her restaurants had been targeted by corporate raider Joseph Vance in the 1970s. After her suspicious death, Walter had spent decades systematically destroying Vance's business empire, piece by piece, a chess game played across 40 years with vengeance as its only goal. A separate section documented the life of Robert Bishop, Walter's son. Photos showed a handsome, serious man who looked like a younger version of Walter, but with Elizabeth's smile. Notes detailed his rise through Bishop Enterprises, his marriage to Catherine, the birth of Nathan. Then obituaries from 1990 when Robert died suddenly of a heart attack at age 49, leaving Catherine to navigate both grief and responsibility as she stepped into his role at the company. On a separate section of the board were more recent photographs and documents focused on Nathan Bishop. Images showed him on yachts with models in nightclubs, with celebrities at casinos with known criminals. Financial statements detailed failed business ventures funded by Walter's money. Copies of checks covering gambling debts bore Walter's signature. One note in Walter's shaky handwriting read, "He has her name but none of her heart." Emma continued examining the massive board, turning finally to a small, empty space in the corner. There, tacked to the corkboard, was a single recent photograph. Emma stared in shock at an image of herself standing outside Sunrise Diner, laughing at something Max had said. Next to it was a small, handwritten note. "She has Elizabeth's spirit. Perhaps she can redeem what I have built on bitterness." Tears streamed down Emma's face. It was never about the toast, not really. Walter hadn't been testing her kindness. He had been looking for something more profound, a reflection of his lost wife. Someone who understood that the value of a place wasn't in its price tag, but in the warmth and dignity it offered to those who entered. Emma wiped her eyes and turned her attention to Walter's desk. On it lay a single sealed envelope addressed to her in the same shaky handwriting. She opened it carefully, unfolding thick cream-colored stationery. "My dear Emma," the letter began, "if you are reading this, I have passed from this world, and you have accepted my unusual bequest. The money is for your freedom. The diner is for your heart. This key is for your future. You remind me so much of Elizabeth, not in appearance but in spirit. You possess the same genuine kindness, the same artist's eye that sees the dignity in ordinary people, the same understanding that a simple meal served with respect can change someone's day or even their life." Elizabeth built her restaurants as havens where people could feel at home. After losing her, I lost myself in revenge. I destroyed Joseph Vance as he destroyed her, but it brought no peace. I built Bishop Enterprises on a foundation of vengeance, and now I fear what it has become under the influence of my grandson. Nathan is not what he appears. In my final years, I discovered he has been secretly working with Victor Vance Joseph's son to dismantle everything I built. The irony is not lost on me. Perhaps it is justice that my empire should fall to a Vance after all, but Sunrise Diner deserves better. You deserve better. I have watched you these past months, seeing how you care for your mother despite the cost to your own dreams, how you treat every customer with dignity, regardless of their station, how you noticed an old man's trembling hands and helped without being asked. The enclosed stock certificate grants you 1 share of Bishop Enterprises. It seems small, but it gives you the legal right to attend the annual shareholder meeting next month. Nathan will be there attempting to seize control of the board. He thinks you are a nobody. Prove him wrong. Everything you need is in this study. Marcus and Mason will help you understand. Trust them. Your unexpected friend, Walter Bishop. Emma set the letter down, her hand trembling. Beneath it was a stock certificate for a single share of Bishop Enterprises, worth perhaps a few $1,000s, but granting her entry to a battlefield she never expected to fight on. She looked around the study with fresh eyes, seeing it now, not as a monument to obsession, but as an arsenal prepared for her. Walter hadn't just given her a diner and a fortune. He had drafted her into a war decades in the making. A soft knock at the door preceded Mason's entrance. "Found what you needed?" he asked. Emma held up the stock certificate. "Walter wants me to stop Nathan from taking over Bishop Enterprises." She laughed, a sound tinged with hysteria. I'm a Waitress, Mason. I don't know the first thing about corporate takeovers. Mason smiled, the expression transforming his intimidating face. That's why Walter surrounded you with people who do. Reed handles the legal side, I handle security, and Walter left you everything he knew about Nathan's plans. He gestured to the wall of evidence. The shareholder meeting is in 3 weeks. Nathan has moved quickly since Walter's death, but we still have time to prepare. Why me? Emma asked the question that had been haunting her since the will reading. Why not someone qualified? Because Walter trusted you, and because you're the only person involved who cares about the right things. Mason crossed to the window looking out at the Millridge skyline. Nathan would sell the company for parts. Catherine would preserve it as a monument to her own importance. You're the only one who might see it as Walter finally did a tool to help people, not to dominate them. Emma closed her eyes, overwhelmed. I need to go back to the diner. I need to think. And I need to tell my mother what's happened. Of course, but first there's something else you should see. Mason led her through another door at the back of the study, revealing a studio bathed in northern light. Easels stood with half-finished canvases, brushes soaked in turpentine palettes, with dried oils in a rainbow of colors. The walls displayed dozens of portraits, each capturing a diner patron with remarkable insight and empathy. Walter painted again in his final years, after meeting you. Mason picked up a small canvas, turning it to reveal Emma's face captured in oils, serving coffee with a gentle smile, the morning light from the diner windows creating a halo effect around her. The brushwork was shaky but masterful, conveying not just her appearance, but something deeper, her essential kindness. He saw you, Mason said simply, just as you saw him. The ride back to Millridge was silent. Emma lost in thought as the motorcycle carried her away from Walter Bishop's secret world and back to the reality she knew. Mason and his men maintained a protective formation, eyes scanning constantly for threats as they crossed into the less affluent part of town. Sunrise Diner glowed in the evening light, its neon sign a beacon against the darkening sky. Inside, Emma could see Diana wiping down tables and Max talking with a customer at the counter. The sight was so normal, so unchanged, that it made the events of the day seem dreamlike. Mason pulled to the curb, cutting the engine. We'll be nearby if you need us, he said as Emma dismounted. Walter set up a secure line. My number's in the folder Reed gave you. Emma nodded, removing the helmet. Thank you, Mason. Don't thank me yet. The real battle's just beginning. Nathan Bishop isn't the type to lose gracefully. He kick-started the Harley, the engine roaring to life. Call if you need anything, anything at all. As the bikers pulled away, Emma stood before the diner, seeing it through new eyes. Not just a workplace now, but her property, her responsibility. Inside were people whose livelihoods depended on his success, people who had no idea their world had changed forever. The bell chimed as Emma pushed open the door. Conversation stopped. Coffee cups paused midway to lips. Every head turned to stare. Max emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. Emma, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Diana snorted from behind the counter. Well, look who's back. How was your field trip with the billionaire's lawyers? Emma took a deep breath. Max, can we talk in your office? I mean, my office, I guess. Max nodded, expression grave, as he led her to the small room at the back of the diner. Once used for storage, it had been converted to a cramped office with a desk, filing cabinet, and single window overlooking the alley behind the building. Max closed the door behind them. So it's true, he said. Walter left you the diner. Emma sank into the desk chair, suddenly exhausted. And $5 million in investments to support it, and his penthouse full of priceless art, and apparently a mission to stop his grandson from destroying his company. She laughed, the sound bordering on tears. All because I cut his toast without being asked. Max leaned against the filing cabinet, arms crossed. It wasn't about the toast, Emma. I know. It was about Elizabeth, his wife. Max's eyebrows rose. He told you about Elizabeth? Not directly, but his study was basically a shrine to her. She owned restaurants, too. Diners like this one. Emma met Max's eyes. Why didn't you tell me about your connection to Walter when he started coming here? Max sighed, the sound of a man releasing a long-held secret. Walter wanted to observe you without interference. He'd been searching for someone with Elizabeth's spirit for years, visiting diners across the country. Then his researchers discovered your story art student, Drops out to care for sick mother, works at local diner. It interested him. So this whole thing was orchestrated. He planned to leave me the diner all along. The thought made Emma uncomfortable, as if her life had been a stage play, with Walter as the unseen director. Max shook his head. No, he bought the place to watch you, to see if you were the person he hoped you might be. The inheritance came later, after months of observation. Walter didn't make decisions like that lightly. Emma absorbed this, trying to reconcile the Walter she knew. Silent, observant, seemingly fragile, with the master strategist who had orchestrated this elaborate scenario. So what happens now? Max asked. Emma opened the folder Reed had given her, spreading documents across the desk. According to this, I'm officially the owner of Sunrise Diner, effective immediately. You're still the manager with a significant salary increase. She looked up. If you want to stay, that is. Where else would I go? Max said with a hint of a smile. This place is my home too. Emma continued scanning the documents. Everyone gets raises, health insurance upgrades, and there's a renovation budget. She closed the folder, suddenly decisive. But first I need to see my mother and explain what's happened. Then I need to understand what Walter was really asking me to do about Nathan and Bishop Enterprises. The next morning, Emma arrived at the diner at 5 a.m., an hour before opening. The sky was still dark stars visible above the small town, untouched by big city light pollution. She unlocked the front door with keys that were now rightfully hers, flipping on lights and starting coffee with the familiar routine of 1,000 previous mornings. But today was different. Today she moved through the space as its owner, seeing with fresh eyes the worn linoleum floor, the cracked vinyl seats, the ancient coffee machine that frequently broke down. Walter had left enough money to transform this place into a gleaming, upscale establishment, but something told her that wasn't what he would have wanted. After visiting her mother the previous evening, a tearful, joyful conversation where Emma promised the best care money could buy, she had spent hours poring over Walter's documents. The financial advisor had called, explaining the immediate steps to secure her inheritance. Her mother would be moving to a premier care facility in Philadelphia, with experimental treatments now within reach. It was as if the weight of the world had lifted from Emma's shoulders, only to be replaced by a different kind of responsibility. The bell above the door chimed. Emma looked up to see Diana standing in the doorway, her usual scowl firmly in place. You're early, Emma said, surprised. It's my regular time, Diana replied defensively. Just because you own the place now doesn't mean the work stops. She hung her coat on the rack, eyeing Emma suspiciously. So what happens now? You going to fire us all and bring in your friends? Emma poured a cup of coffee and slid it across the counter. I don't have any friends to bring in, Diana. And no, I'm not firing anyone. In fact, everyone's getting raises. Diana took the coffee but remained standing, as if sitting might signal acceptance of the new situation. Why would he do it? Leave everything to you. It doesn't make sense. It's complicated, Emma said, unwilling to share Walter's personal tragedy. But I think he saw something here worth preserving. It's just a diner, Diana scoffed. Nothing special. Emma considered the older woman, wondering what experiences had shaped her bitterness. It's not just a diner to the people who come here every day. For some, it might be the only place they feel welcome. The only place someone remembers how they like their coffee, or asks how they're doing and actually listens to the answer. Diana's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Emma noticed the gold locket containing her son's photo always around Diana's neck. Your son, Emma ventured carefully. He was in Grenada. Diana's hand moved automatically to the locket, her fingers tracing its familiar contours. Marines, just like Max, 22 years old. Her voice, usually sharp, had gone soft with memory. Good kid. Never gave me a minute's trouble. Wanted to serve his country, make a difference. Emma waited, sensing there was more. They sent him home in a box with a flag on top. Diana's eyes hardened again. Government said it was for freedom or democracy or some other nonsense. All I know is my boy never came home. I'm sorry, Emma said simply. Diana nodded, once the vulnerability disappearing behind her usual armor. So you're keeping the diner the same? Not exactly the same, Emma smiled. First thing, we're getting a new air conditioner, and the kitchen equipment needs updating. But the soul of this place, that stays. The door chimed again as Max entered, followed by the kitchen staff. The morning rhythm began as it always had, coffee brewing, grill heating silverware being rolled into napkins. Emma found comfort in the familiarity, even as her mind raced with everything she'd learned and everything still unknown. At 6 a.m., they opened the doors. The regulars trickled in, Frank with his newspaper. The construction workers from the site down the block, the secretaries from the insurance office across the street. News of Emma's inheritance had spread through town with typical small-town efficiency. She felt their curious stares, heard their whispered conversations. Frank approached the counter, folding his newspaper. "Heard you came into some money," he said without preamble, "and ownership of this establishment." "News travels fast," Emma replied, pouring his usual coffee. "Small town." Frank shrugged. "People are wondering if you'll stick around or take the money and run." "I'm staying," Emma said firmly. "The diner stays too." Frank nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good. Change isn't always for the better." He lowered his voice. "Just watch yourself with Bishop's people. That family didn't get rich by playing fair." The morning rush kept Emma too busy for further conversation. She fell into the familiar routine of orders and deliveries, coffee refills, and friendly banter. For a few hours, she could almost forget the penthouse, the millions, and the cryptic mission Walter had entrusted to her. Just after 10 a.m., when the breakfast crowd had thinned, the bell chimed again. Emma looked up to see Nathan Bishop standing in the doorway, immaculate in a tailored suit that cost more than most Millridge residents earned in a month. Behind him waited a sleek black Mercedes with tinted windows, his driver standing at attention beside it. The diner fell silent as Nathan surveyed the space with undisguised contempt. His gaze settled on Emma, a predatory smile spreading across his handsome face. "Miss Porter," he said, his voice carrying across the quiet diner. "I wonder if we might have a word in private." Emma felt every eye in the place watching her. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it here." Nathan's smile didn't waver. "As you wish." He approached the counter, removing his leather gloves finger by finger. "I'd like to make you an offer for this establishment. $2 million cash. Far more than this greasy spoon is worth." Gasps and murmurs spread through the diner. $2 million was a fortune in Millridge, where the average home sold for less than $100,000. Emma maintained her composure. "The diner isn't for sale." "Everything has a price," Nathan countered smoothly. $3 million then. Enough for you to buy your own restaurant in a location more suited to someone of your new station. Perhaps somewhere near that art school you had to abandon. The offer struck Emma like a physical blow. $3 million plus the $250,000 from Walter would set her and her mother up for life. She could return to school, pursue her art, free herself from the responsibilities that had chained her to Millridge. "How do you know about my art school?" she asked, suspicious. Nathan waved a dismissive hand. "I make it my business to know everything about people who suddenly appear in my family's affairs. Your mother's illness, your student loans, your abandoned artistic aspirations. All very touching, all very expensive." His smile turned calculating. "Think about it, Miss Porter. What would you rather have, a rundown diner in a dying town or the freedom to pursue your dreams?" It was a tempting vision carefully crafted to exploit her deepest desires. But something about Nathan's confident smirk reminded Emma of the evidence in Walter's study, the web of connections showing Nathan's secret dealings with the Vance family. This wasn't about the diner. It was about something more. "The diner stays with me," Emma said firmly. "Your grandfather wanted it that way." Nathan's charming facade cracked, revealing a flash of the anger she'd witnessed at the will reading. "My grandfather was a senile old man manipulated by a pretty young waitress," he snapped. "The courts will see it that way too when I contest the will." "Contest all you want," Emma replied, surprising herself with their steadiness. Walter was of sound mind, and his wishes were clear. Nathan leaned across the counter, lowering his voice. "You have no idea what you're getting into, Miss Porter. No idea who you're dealing with. This isn't just about a worthless diner. Back away now while you still can." The threat hung in the air between them. Emma felt fear flutter in her chest but pushed it down. "Is that all, Mr. Bishop? Because I have customers waiting?" Nathan straightened, adjusting his tie. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Not by a long shot." He turned and strode out of the diner, climbing into the waiting Mercedes without a backward glance. As the car pulled away, Emma became aware that her hands were shaking. The entire diner erupted in conversation, the confrontation providing gossip material for weeks to come. Max appeared at her side, concern evident in his weathered face. "You okay?" he asked. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. "You did good," Max said quietly. "But he's right about one thing. This isn't over." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Emma went through the motions of her job, smiling and serving, but her mind kept returning to Nathan's threat and Walter's letter. What was she really fighting for? What secrets lay behind the seemingly simple inheritance of a small-town diner? At closing time, she sent the staff home early, assuring them she could handle the final cleanup alone. As the last employee left, Emma locked the front door and turned off the open sign. The sudden silence was a relief after the day's chaos. She made a fresh pot of coffee and sat at booth 5, Walter's booth, gazing out at the darkened street. Rain had begun to fall again, droplets tracing paths down the window glass, distorting the neon lights of neighboring businesses. A soft knock at the door startled her. Through the rain-blurred glass, she could make out a familiar silhouette, Marcus Reed, Walter's attorney, standing under a black umbrella. Emma unlocked the door to let him in. "Miss Porter." Reed nodded formally, shaking water from his umbrella. "I apologize for the late hour, but there are matters we must discuss urgently." "More surprises from Walter?" Emma asked, leading him to a booth. "In a manner of speaking." Reed set his briefcase on the table, opening it to reveal a laptop and several thick folders. "Nathan Bishop has made his first move. He's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow afternoon to challenge the terms of Walter's will." Emma sank into the booth across from him. "Can he do that?" "Legally, no. The will is ironclad, but Nathan controls enough board members to create difficulties." Reed removed his glasses, polishing them with a monogrammed handkerchief. "What concerns me more is his meeting this morning with Victor Vance." "Victor Vance, the son of the man Walter blamed for Elizabeth's death." Reed nodded, impressed by her quick understanding. "The very same. Our sources indicate they're planning to use the shareholder meeting to push through a merger between Bishop Enterprises and Vance Industries. It would effectively dismantle everything Walter built over 4 decades. And my single share of stock is supposed to stop this. How exactly?" Emma asked, the absurdity of her situation suddenly overwhelming. "Your share gives you the right to speak at the meeting, to tell the shareholders about Walter's true intentions." Reed opened one of the folders, revealing complex financial documents. "But first, you need to understand what you're fighting for." For the next 2 hours, Reed walked Emma through the structure of Bishop Enterprises, explaining how Walter had deliberately fragmented his holdings in his final years, placing significant assets in charitable trusts and foundations that Nathan couldn't touch. The company itself was vulnerable to takeover, but the true wealth had already been protected. So Walter knew Nathan would try to sell to Vance, Emma realized. He was planning for this all along. "Walter Bishop never left anything to chance," Reed confirmed. "He chose you not just for your kindness, but for your integrity. He believed you would make the right choices when the time came." "And what are the right choices?" Emma asked. "I'm just a waitress, Mr. Reed. I don't know anything about running a multinational corporation." "Perhaps that's precisely why Walter chose you," Reed said thoughtfully. "You see people, not profit margins. You understand what Elizabeth understood, that businesses should serve communities, not exploit them." A rumble of motorcycle engines outside interrupted their conversation. Emma looked up to see Mason and his men pulling up to the curb, their bikes gleaming wet in the rain. Mason entered the diner, removing his soaked leather jacket. "We have a problem," he announced without preamble. "Nathan's hired security detail has been asking questions around town, about Emma's mother specifically." Emma felt cold fear grip her heart. "My mother, she's at Millridge Care Center. She can barely feed herself, let alone defend against threats." "I've already handled it," Mason assured her. "2 of my men are stationed at the care center until we can arrange the move to Philadelphia tomorrow. No one gets near your mother without proper identification." "This is escalating faster than anticipated." Reed frowned, closing his briefcase. "Miss Porter, it might be best if you relocated temporarily to Walter's penthouse. It has excellent security." Emma shook her head firmly. "I'm not running away. This is my diner now, my responsibility." Mason exchanged glances with Reed. "At least let us improve security here. The locks are a joke and there's no alarm system. One brick through that window and anyone could get in." "Do whatever you need to," Emma agreed. "But I'm staying." After Reed departed, Mason remained behind, inspecting the diner's entrances and windows with professional thoroughness. Emma watched him work, reality finally settling over her like a heavy blanket. "I'm in over my head, aren't I?" she asked quietly. Mason paused, turning to face her. "Everyone's in over their head until they learn to swim." He approached, sitting across from her at Walter's booth. "You want to know why Walter really chose you?" Emma nodded. "Because you remind him of who he was before revenge consumed him. Before Bishop Enterprises. Before the money and the power." Mason's usually stern face softened with memory. "Walter was an artist first, just like you. He saw the world as it could be, not just as it was. Somewhere along the way, he lost that vision. In you, he found it again." Emma considered this, trying to reconcile the Walter she knew with the complex man everyone else described. "What if I fail? What if Nathan wins?" "Then you still have this place," Mason gestured around the diner, "and the knowledge that you tried. That's all any of us can do." The rain continued through the night, a steady drumming on the diner's roof. Emma slept fitfully on the small cot in the break room, unwilling to leave the diner unprotected despite Mason's men stationed outside. Her dreams were a confused jumble of images. Walter's trembling hands, Nathan's threatening smile, Elizabeth Bishop standing before her restaurant with pride shining in her eyes. Morning arrived with watery sunlight and the routine of the diner calling her back to familiar tasks. Emma moved through the day in a haze of coffee pots and order pads, her mind elsewhere. The staff had noticed the bikers stationed outside the new locks Mason had installed overnight, but no one asked questions directly. Small towns had their own way of respecting privacy even while gossip flourished. At precisely noon, the bell above the door chimed. Emma looked up, expecting Nathan or perhaps Reed with more documents. Instead, she found herself facing Catherine Bishop. Walter's daughter-in-law stood rigidly in the doorway, elegant, in a tailored navy suit that emphasized her still slender figure. At 65, Catherine retained the beauty that had made her a sought-after debutante decades earlier, though time had hardened her features into aristocratic severity. "Miss Porter," Catherine's voice carried across the diner. "Might I have a word?" Emma nodded, gesturing to an empty booth far from curious ears. Catherine moved through the diner as if through a particularly distasteful museum exhibit, taking her seat with careful precision to avoid contact with the vinyl. "I won't waste time with pleasantries." Catherine began, declining Emma's offer of coffee with a dismissive wave. "I want to understand what game you're playing." "No game," Emma replied simply. "Walter left me the diner. I intend to honor his wishes by keeping it running." Catherine studied Emma with penetrating intensity. "Young women don't captivate wealthy old men through innocence alone, Miss Porter. What hold did you have on my father-in-law?" The accusation stung, but Emma maintained her composure. "Walter was a customer who became a friend. Nothing more. He saw something in me that reminded him of Elizabeth." At the mention of Elizabeth's name, Catherine's perfect posture faltered slightly. "You know about Elizabeth?" "I know Walter loved her very much. I know her death destroyed something in him, and I know he spent decades avenging her by dismantling Vance Industries." Catherine's carefully maintained facade cracked surprise, evident in her widened eyes. "He told you all this. He left me his study, the evidence wall, the paintings, everything." For a long moment, Catherine was silent, recalibrating her approach. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its brittle edge. "Then you know more than most. Walter shared Elizabeth with very few people. After she died, he never even spoke her name in my presence again." Emma felt a sudden wave of compassion for this proud, difficult woman. "You loved her too," she realized. "Elizabeth." Catherine looked away, gazing out the rain-streaked window. "She was the mother I never had. When I married Robert, she welcomed me into the family without reservation. Taught me how to navigate Walter's moods, how to run a household, how to be a bishop." A shadow crossed her face. When she died, everything changed. Walter became obsessed with revenge. Robert threw himself into expanding the company. I was left trying to hold a family together that no longer existed in any meaningful way. "And Nathan?" Emma asked gently. Catherine's expression hardened again. "Nathan was 10 when Elizabeth died. Walter barely acknowledged his existence, after that too consumed with destroying Vance to notice his own grandson." She fixed Emma with a steely gaze. "That's the man you're so eager to honor. A man who abandoned his family for revenge." "I'm not defending everything Walter did," Emma said carefully, "but I do know he regretted what his choices cost him. In the end, he was trying to make amends." By giving his fortune to a stranger instead of his family. Catherine's voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. Emma leaned forward, lowering her voice. Did you know Nathan is working with Victor Vance, that he plans to sell Bishop Enterprises to the son of the man Walter believed killed Elizabeth? The color drained from Catherine's face. That's impossible. Nathan wouldn't. The evidence is all there in Walter's study, financial records, meeting notes. Nathan has been planning this for over a year. Catherine sat very still, absorbing this information. For the first time, Emma saw past the imperious exterior to the wounded woman beneath someone who had spent decades trying to preserve a family legacy, only to discover it might be destroyed from within. Why are you telling me this? Catherine asked finally. Because I think you care about what happens to Bishop Enterprises, Emma replied honestly. And because whatever Walter became after Elizabeth died, I believe he built something worth saving. Catherine stood abruptly, gathering her designer purse. You understand nothing about our world, Miss Porter. Nothing about what's at stake. She paused, her expression conflicted. But if what you say about Nathan is true, she didn't complete the thought, turning instead to leave. Catherine, Emma called after her. The shareholder meeting. Walter believed it was important enough to ensure I could attend. Why? Catherine paused at the door. Because it's where Nathan plans to make his move, where he'll try to convince the board to approve the Vance merger. She hesitated, then added quietly, Be careful, Miss Porter. Nathan isn't accustomed to losing, especially to someone he considers beneath him. After Catherine left, Emma remained seated, mind racing. The confrontation had revealed something important. Catherine wasn't necessarily an enemy. Proud, difficult, skeptical, yes. But her love for Elizabeth and her commitment to the Bishop legacy might make her an ally against Nathan. Dawn broke over Millridge with golden light spilling across weathered buildings and empty streets. Emma stood before the bathroom mirror in her small apartment, barely recognizing the woman staring back. Gone was the waitress uniform, replaced by a conservative navy blue suit Marcus Reed had arranged to be delivered overnight. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her face carefully made up to project confidence she didn't feel. The suit fit perfectly, a mystery that unsettled her until Reed explained that Walter had noted her measurements in one of his many journals. The man had observed everything, planned for every contingency. Even now, days after his death, Walter Bishop's presence guided her steps like an invisible hand. A gentle knock at the door announced Mason's arrival. The biker looked transformed in a dark suit, his beard neatly trimmed, hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Only the tattoos peeking above his collar and the weathered lines of his face hinted at his true nature. Ready, he asked, his deep voice reassuring in its steadiness. Emma nodded, gathering the leather portfolio Reed had prepared containing Walter's key documents and the single stock certificate that gave her the right to be in the boardroom. As ready as I'll ever be. Outside, the morning air carried the crispness of early autumn. 3 motorcycles waited at the curb, engines purring with controlled power. The fourth Mason's had been replaced by a sleek black sedan. Thought you might prefer this for today, Mason explained, opening the passenger door. Less dramatic entrance. I appreciate that. Emma smiled weakly. The ride to Bishop Enterprises passed in silence, Emma reviewing mental notes of everything she'd studied over the past days. Walter's files had revealed the intricate web of Nathan's dealings with Victor Vance, their secret meetings, offshore accounts, preliminary merger documents. The evidence was compelling but complex corporate maneuvers wrapped in legal jargon designed to confuse outsiders. Remember, Mason said as they approached downtown, most of those board members knew Walter for decades. They respected him even if they feared him sometimes. Make them see he chose you for a reason. Bishop Tower rose above Millridge like a monument to ambition, 40 stories of steel and glass reflecting the morning sun. In the lobby, Marcus Reed awaited them, immaculate in a charcoal suit, gold cufflinks catching the light as he checked his watch. The meeting begins in 30 minutes, he informed them, guiding Emma toward a private elevator. Nathan arrived early with his legal team. Catherine is already upstairs. Several major shareholders have expressed concerns about the suddenness of the meeting, which works in our favor. Emma stepped into the elevator, her heart hammering against her ribs. What exactly happens in there? Nathan will present his proposal for merging with Vance Industries. He'll frame it as a strategic partnership that maximizes shareholder value. Reed's tone conveyed professional disapproval. After the presentation as a shareholder, you have the right to address the board. That's when you present Walter's evidence. And then they vote. Reed's expression softened slightly. This won't be easy, Emma. Nathan has cultivated these relationships for years. But Walter believed you could sway them with the truth. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, revealing a reception area where clusters of men and women in expensive suits conversed in hushed tones. Their conversations faltered as Emma emerged between Reed and Mason, curious eyes assessing and dismissing her in the same glance, a distinguished older man detached from one group approaching with his hand extended. Marcus, good morning. This must be Miss Porter. His smile seemed genuine beneath silver hair and intelligent eyes. George Marshall, CEO of Bishop Enterprises. Walter spoke highly of you. Emma shook his hand, surprised. He did. In his way, Marshall chuckled. Walter was never effusive, but he mentioned a young woman who showed him extraordinary kindness. Said she reminded him of Elizabeth. A shadow crossed Marshall's face at the mention of Elizabeth's name. I knew Elizabeth, he explained, seeing Emma's surprise. I was with the company from the beginning. She was the heart of everything Walter built, though few remember that now. Mr. Boyer, Marshall Reed interjected smoothly, perhaps you might introduce Emma to some of the key shareholders before the meeting begins. Of course. Marshall offered Emma his arm in an old-world gesture. Most of them are curious about the mysterious young woman Walter included in his will. Best to demystify yourself before Nathan can control the narrative. For the next 20 minutes, Emma was guided through a crash course in corporate networking. Marshall introduced her to board members, institutional investors, and company executives whose names blurred together in a parade of forced smiles and assessing gazes. Some were openly skeptical, others politely curious, a few genuinely warm, particularly the older members who had known Walter longest. Emma did her best to present herself as thoughtful and respectful rather than presumptuous. She spoke of Walter with genuine affection, described their morning ritual at the diner, explained how she'd come to care for the quiet old man who never complained about his trembling hands. He was different at the diner, she told an elderly board member who expressed surprise at Walter's bequest. No pretenses, no power dynamics, just a man enjoying his breakfast and watching the world pass by him. Across the reception area, Nathan Bishop observed her progress with thinly veiled contempt. Beside him stood an elegant man in his 50s, hawk-nosed and sharp-eyed, whom Emma recognized from Walter's files as Victor Vance. The son of the man Walter had spent decades destroying watched her with calculating interest. Don't look now, Mason murmured near her ear. But Catherine Bishop just arrived, and she's heading straight for you. Emma turned to see Walter's daughter-in-law approaching with purpose in her stride. Unlike yesterday at the diner, Catherine's expression was unreadable, her posture rigid with tension. Miss Porter, Catherine nodded curtly. I see you've met George. She glanced at Marshall with something like veiled warning in her eyes. The meeting is about to begin. I trust you are prepared. Before Emma could respond, the boardroom doors opened. Nathan Bishop stood in the doorway, assuming the mantle of authority with practiced ease. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll please take your seats, we can begin this morning's proceedings. The boardroom was impressive, designed to intimidate with its vast mahogany table and throne-like leather chairs. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Mill Ridge and the countryside beyond a literal representation of the company's lofty position above the town it had once helped build. Portraits of past leaders lined one wall, Walter's stern visage watching over the proceedings from a gilded frame. Emma was directed to a chair in the observer section, separated from the main table where board members took their places. Mason positioned himself against the wall behind her, a silent guardian in a room full of potential adversaries. Reed sat beside her, opening his briefcase with methodical precision. Nathan took his position at the head of the table opposite George Marshall. Victor Vance sat to Nathan's right, his presence causing murmurs among board members unfamiliar with the planned announcement. Catherine chose a seat halfway down the table, her expression carefully neutral. Good morning, Nathan began, his voice confident, practiced in the art of corporate persuasion. Thank you all for accommodating this special session on such short notice. As you know, my grandfather's passing has created both challenges and opportunities for Bishop Enterprises. Today I wish to address the path forward. Emma watched Nathan work the room, noting the easy charisma he deployed like a weapon. Handsome, articulate, born to privilege, but carrying it with the assurance of someone who believes they deserve every advantage. The board members responded to his energy, nodding and smiling at appropriate moments. For too long, Bishop Enterprises has been constrained by outdated rivalries and personal vendettas. Nathan continued, his gaze briefly flickering toward Emma. My grandfather built this company with vision and determination, but in his later years that vision narrowed. Today, we have an opportunity to broaden our horizons through strategic partnership. He gestured to Victor Vance, who acknowledged the room with a slight nod. Many of you know the history between Bishop and Vance Industries. What you may not know is that Victor and I have spent the past year exploring synergies between our organizations. A murmur rippled through the board members. Nathan raised his hand for silence, his smile never wavering. I know this comes as a surprise to some of you. The Bishop-Vance rivalry is legendary in business circles, but legends belong to the past. The future belongs to those with the courage to move beyond old grievances. For the next 20 minutes, Nathan presented his vision for a merged company. Sleek slides appeared on the wall screen, showing projected growth charts, market expansions, and cost-saving redundancies. The terminology was deliberately opaque, bearing the true implications beneath layers of corporate jargon. Emma listened carefully, recognizing the strategy from Walter's notes. Nathan was positioning the merger as a forward-thinking business decision while concealing its true purpose, the systematic dismantling of Walter Bishop's legacy. If approved, the new entity would sell off Bishop's core divisions, leveraging the company's assets to fund expansion into Vance's existing markets. Within 5 years, nothing of Walter's original company would remain. As Nathan concluded his presentation, Emma noticed George Marshall's troubled expression. The CEO clearly recognized the destructive elements hidden within Nathan's proposal, but seemed uncertain how to counter them. Before we move to discussion, Nathan announced, I'd like to introduce a formal motion to approve entering merger negotiations with Vance Industries, with myself as lead negotiator, empowered to establish preliminary terms. He paused, surveying the room. Do I have a second? A board member near Nathan's end of the table raised his hand. Second. Nathan smiled with satisfaction. Excellent. Now, as is customary, we'll open the floor for discussion before voting. Does anyone wish to speak? George Marshall cleared his throat. I have significant concerns about the structure of this proposed merger, particularly the accelerated timeline and the implications for our core businesses. Walter always maintained that Bishop Enterprises should remain independent. Nathan's smile turned condescending. With all due respect, George, my grandfather's positions evolved over time. Had he been presented with the financial benefits of this partnership, I'm confident he would have approved. I'm not so certain, Marshall countered, but his objection lacked force, undermining the authority Nathan projected. Anyone else? Nathan asked, scanning the room with the confidence of someone who has already secured the votes needed. This was the moment. Emma took a deep breath and stood. I would like to address the board. Nathan's smile faltered momentarily before returning with icy precision. Ah, Miss Porter, our unexpected shareholder. By all means, the floor is yours. His tone conveyed clear dismissal, a token acknowledgement before proceeding with his predetermined agenda. Emma moved to the podium positioned at one end of the table, setting Walter's portfolio before her. The eyes of every board member tracked her movement, curiosity mingled with skepticism. She could practically hear their thoughts. Who is this young woman to address matters of corporate governance? What could a waitress possibly contribute to this discussion? Good morning, she began, her voice steadier than she expected. My name is Emma Porter. Until recently, I knew Walter Bishop simply as the quiet elderly gentleman who came to Sunrise Diner every morning at precisely 7:15. I had no idea he was the Walter Bishop, founder of Bishop Enterprises and one of the wealthiest men in America. She paused, making eye contact with several board members, particularly the older ones who had known Walter longest. I'm not a businesswoman. I have no MBA, no experience in corporate boardrooms. What I do have is something equally valuable. I knew Walter Bishop, the man, not Walter Bishop, the legend. Emma opened the portfolio, removing a small photograph of Walter at his usual booth newspaper, spread before him, coffee cup in hand. This is how I knew him. Not as a titan of industry, but as a man struggling with Parkinson's disease, a man whose hands trembled so badly some mornings that he couldn't cut his own toast. A man who, despite his billions, found comfort in the simplicity of a small-town diner where no one treated him differently because of his wealth or power. She looked directly at Nathan, whose expression had hardened. Walter Bishop was many things in his lifetime. An artist, a CIA operative during the Cold War, a devoted husband to Elizabeth, a father to Robert, a business genius, and yes, a man consumed by vengeance after the tragic death of his wife. But in his final years, Walter found perspective. He recognized that the empire he built on revenge had lost its soul, and he sought to restore it before it was too late. Emma removed several documents from the portfolio, sliding them toward the board members nearest her. These are records of meetings between Nathan Bishop and Victor Vance dating back 18 months. Long before Walter's death, they were planning this merger, waiting for Walter to become incapacitated or dead so they could proceed. Nathan surged to his feet. "This is absurd. Where did you get these documents?" "From Walter's private study," Emma replied calmly. "He was aware of your plans, Nathan. He documented everything, the offshore accounts, the preliminary asset valuations, the secret division of Bishop Properties after the merger." Murmurs swept through the boardroom as the documents were passed from hand to hand. Nathan's face flushed with anger. "These are fabrications. This woman is attempting to manipulate you with forged documents to protect her unexpected windfall." Emma continued undeterred. "Walter Bishop didn't leave me his diner and investments because I cut his toast. He left them to me because I showed him something he had forgotten existed: simple human kindness without agenda." She turned to address the full board directly. "Walter chose me as his unlikely messenger precisely because I have no stake in corporate power struggles. My only interest is in honoring the true vision of the man you all claim to respect." She removed a final document from the portfolio. "This is Walter Bishop's last personal statement, written 3 days before his death. He entrusted it to Marcus Reed with instructions that it be read if Nathan ever attempted to sell Bishop Enterprises to Vance Industries." Reed stood, confirming with a solemn nod. "I can verify the authenticity of this document. It bears Walter's signature, witnessed by myself and 2 others." Emma began to read, "To the board of directors of Bishop Enterprises, if this letter is being read, it means my grandson Nathan has moved forward with his plan to sell my life's work to the Vance family, something I explicitly forbade during my lifetime. I built this company twice. First as a genuine enterprise focused on creating value and supporting communities like Millridge. Then after Elizabeth's death, I rebuilt it as a weapon of vengeance against Joseph Vance, whom I held responsible for taking her from me. I succeeded in destroying Vance, but in doing so, I corrupted my own creation. Bishop Enterprises became exactly what Elizabeth would have hated: a soulless entity focused solely on profit and power. My greatest regret is that I allowed grief to transform something born of love into something fueled by hatred. In my final years, I sought to correct this error by restructuring the company, placing significant assets in charitable trusts and foundations beyond Nathan's reach. I knew he would attempt to sell what remained to Victor Vance, ironically restoring to the son what I took from the father. I do not ask you to preserve Bishop Enterprises out of loyalty to me or my memory. I ask you to consider what this company could become if guided by the principles that originally inspired it: innovation, community, investment, and ethical business practices." The young woman delivering this message, Emma Porter, represents everything Bishop Enterprises has forgotten: integrity, compassion, and genuine human connection. She has no experience in your world, but she possesses something far more valuable: the clear vision to see people as they truly are, not as instruments to be used or obstacles to be removed. I leave the future of Bishop Enterprises in your hands with this final thought: companies like people are defined not by their wealth, but by their character. Choose wisely what you wish this company to become. Walter Bishop. A profound silence fell over the boardroom as Emma finished reading. Several of the older board members appeared visibly moved. Catherine Bishop sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on a point in the distance, something unreadable moving across her features. Nathan recovered first, his charm resurfacing like a mask slipped back into place. A touching sentiment from a man clearly in mental decline. "We all respected my grandfather, but his paranoia about the Vance family was well known, an unfortunate fixation that clouded his judgment in his final years." He gestured dismissively toward Emma. "As for Miss Porter, her sudden appearance in my grandfather's life just months before his death raises obvious questions about undue influence. The courts will almost certainly invalidate these supposed final wishes once proper legal proceedings begin. Victor Vance spoke for the first time, his voice smooth as polished stone. While this family drama is certainly fascinating, it doesn't change the business fundamentals. The merger proposal offers exceptional value to Bishop shareholders. Perhaps we should focus on the numbers rather than sentimentality. Emma felt the momentum shifting, Nathan's practiced corporate maneuvering regaining control of the narrative. She had delivered Walter's message, but would it be enough? The board members exchanged glances, their expressions uncertain. George Marshall looked defeated, a man who recognized the truth but lacked the power to defend it. Then unexpectedly, Catherine Bishop rose to her feet. "I would like to address the board," she announced, her aristocratic voice cutting through the tension. Nathan frowned. "Mother, we can discuss family matters privately after." "This is not a family matter, Nathan. This is a matter of corporate governance and fiduciary responsibility." Catherine's tone brooked no interruption. She moved to stand beside Emma at the podium, a surprising alliance of youth and experience. "I have served as executive chair of Bishop Enterprises for 15 years, Catherine reminded the room. "Before that, I worked alongside my husband, Robert Walter's son, until his death. I have been a part of this company longer than most people in this room." She removed a document from her designer handbag. "Last night, after speaking with Miss Porter, I had our security team review Nathan's company email archives. What they discovered confirms everything she has presented today." Nathan's face drained of color. "You had no right." "I had every right," Catherine cut him off coldly. "As executive chair, I am responsible for protecting this company from threats internal or external." She handed the document to George Marshall. "This is a transcript of communications between Nathan and Victor Vance, discussing the systematic liquidation of Bishop Enterprises' core assets following the proposed merger." Marshall scanned the document, his expression darkening. "This describes selling off our manufacturing divisions, terminating our charitable foundations, and essentially hollowing out the company while extracting maximum short-term profit." Nathan stood, his composure cracking. "Those are preliminary discussions, only exploring potential synergies." "They are a blueprint for destruction," Catherine interrupted. "The destruction of everything Walter, Robert, and I spent decades building." She turned to face her grandson directly. "Did you think I wouldn't discover what you were planning? Did you think I would stand aside while you dismantled my husband's legacy?" The boardroom erupted in overlapping conversations as board members reacted to this unexpected development. Emma stepped back, watching the corporate drama unfold. Nathan attempted to regain control, but the damage was done. His carefully constructed proposal was unraveling under scrutiny. George Marshall called for order, his CEO authority finally asserting itself. "In light of these revelations, I propose we table the merger discussion pending a full investigation into these allegations." "Second," called several voices simultaneously. "All in favor?" Marshall asked. A forest of hands rose around the table. "Motion carries. The merger proposal is tabled indefinitely." Nathan slammed his portfolio shut, fury radiating from every movement. "This is not over. The courts will see the same evidence we've seen today," Catherine interrupted, her voice ice cold. "Evidence of your betrayal, not just of Walter's wishes, but of your fiduciary duty to this company." Victor Vance stood, straightening his immaculate suit. "I believe my presence is no longer required. Nathan will discuss next steps privately." With a nod to the board, he departed, leaving Nathan isolated at the head of the table. George Marshall cleared his throat. "I believe we have one final matter to address. Walter's letter mentioned restructuring and the creation of charitable foundations. Marcus, can you elaborate?" Reed approached the table with a new set of documents. Walter established the Bishop Legacy Foundation, endowed with significant company resources. His will specifies that the foundation focus on community renewal, small business support, and arts education, starting with Millridge and expanding to similar communities nationwide. Marshall nodded thoughtfully. "And who administers this foundation?" "Walter named Emma Porter as executive director," Reed replied, "with an advisory board including Catherine Bishop and several community leaders." Emma gasped softly. This was news to her. Walter hadn't just left her a diner and investments. He'd entrusted her with implementing his vision of redemption. Catherine turned to Emma, studying her with new consideration. It seems my father-in-law saw something in you that the rest of us missed. She extended her hand in a gesture that seemed to cost her considerable pride. Perhaps we should discuss how to move forward, Miss Porter. The board meeting concluded shortly thereafter, Nathan stalking out without further comment. Emma remained seated as the room emptied, trying to process everything that had transpired. Mason appeared at her side, a rare smile lighting his weathered face. "You did it?" he said simply. Emma shook her head, still dazed. "Catherine did it. I just delivered Walter's message." "Which is exactly what he wanted," Reed commented, joining them. "Walter knew Nathan would underestimate you. He knew Catherine would investigate once given reason to doubt. He played a long game right to the end." "So what happens now?" Emma asked. Reed smiled slightly. "Now you have work to do, a diner to renovate, a foundation to establish, a legacy to honor." Emma left Bishop Tower feeling strangely light, as if a weight had been lifted that she hadn't known she carried. Mason walked beside her, the formality of his suit unable to conceal the vigilant protector beneath. "Will Nathan retaliate?" she asked as they reached the street. "Probably," Mason answered honestly, "but not immediately. Catherine's revelations hurt him with the board. He'll need time to rebuild his position. And in the meantime? In the meantime, you live your life, run your diner, paint your pictures, be the person Walter saw in you." Mason helped her into the waiting sedan. "We'll be around if you need us." The autumn afternoon spread golden light across Millridge as Emma returned to Sunrise Diner. The neon open sign glowed in the window, and through the glass, she could see the counter full of regular customers, Diana moving efficiently between tables, Max calling orders through the kitchen window. Ordinary people leading ordinary lives, unaware of the corporate drama that had played out across town. Emma entered, the familiar bell chiming above the door. Conversations paused as heads turned to take in her transformed appearance. "Well, look at you," Diana commented. Eyebrows raised at Emma's tailored suit. "Fancy lawyer meeting go okay?" "Better than expected," Emma smiled. "Is Max in the back?" She found him in the office reviewing invoices with reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked up as she entered, taking in her expression. "Good news. The merger is dead. Nathan's been exposed. Catherine is surprisingly on our side." Emma sank into the chair across from him, suddenly exhausted. "Walter planned it all, Max. Every step." Max nodded, unsurprised. That was Walter's way. Always 3 moves ahead. He removed his reading glasses. "So what happens to the diner?" "It stays ours," Emma said firmly, "but I'm thinking it needs some changes." Over the following weeks, Sunrise Diner underwent a careful transformation. Emma used Walter's renovation budget to update the kitchen equipment, install new booths, and repair the aging infrastructure, but she preserved the soul of the place. The jukebox remained restored to pristine condition. The counter kept its classic design, though the stools were reupholstered in the same red vinyl. Her mother, now receiving specialized treatment at a premier facility in Philadelphia, visited the diner for the grand reopening. Seeing her mother's smile as she sat in the newly renovated space, Emma felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Walter's generosity had changed not just her life, but her mother's as well, providing hope where before there had been only resignation. Booth 5 received special attention. A small brass plaque identified it as Walter's Corner. The table was refinished but not replaced, Walter's initials faintly visible where he had absently carved them with his thumbnail one morning while reading the paper. Emma divided her time between the diner and the newly established Bishop Legacy Foundation. Catherine proved an unexpected ally, her business acumen complementing Emma's community connections. Together, they created programs to revitalize Millridge, funding small business startups, establishing a community arts center, and providing scholarships for local students. Mason and his men remained a presence in Emma's life, their motorcycles occasionally rumbling up to the diner for breakfast or coffee. They shed their corporate suits, returning to leather jackets and denim, but their protective vigilance never wavered. Nathan Bishop might have retreated, but he hadn't surrendered. 2 months after the board meeting, Emma was surprised to find Nathan waiting outside the diner one evening as she locked up. He leaned against his Mercedes, looking less polished than she remembered, his expensive suit replaced by casual attire. "Miss Porter," he nodded, his former arrogance notably absent. "Nathan," she replied cautiously. "What can I do for you?" "I wanted to see it," he said, gesturing toward the diner. "The place that meant so much to my grandfather. The place he chose over me." The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable, but there was something else too, a vulnerability Emma hadn't seen before. He didn't choose the diner over you, Nathan, Emma said quietly. He chose what it represented: authenticity, connection, the things Elizabeth valued. At the mention of his grandmother's name, Nathan's expression softened slightly. I barely remember her. I was so young when she died. He looked at Emma with genuine curiosity. What was it like being with him here? Quiet, Emma answered honestly. Peaceful. He came to watch people, I think. To remember what it was like to be part of something real. Nathan nodded, slowly absorbing this. I'm leaving Millridge, selling my shares back to the company. Catherine's arranging an employee ownership program with them. He smiled faintly at Emma's surprised expression. Her idea, not mine, but it feels right somehow. Where will you go? Emma asked. Europe first, then who knows? He shrugged. I've spent my whole life trying to live up to the Bishop name. Maybe it's time to find out who Nathan is without it. Emma regarded him thoughtfully. That sounds like something Walter might approve of. Perhaps. Nathan straightened, preparing to leave. Goodbye, Miss Porter. Take care of his legacy. It matters more than I understood. As Nathan drove away, Emma felt a strange sense of closure. Walter's final gambit had accomplished more than securing his company. It had freed his grandson from the burden of bitterness, giving him a chance to start again. On a crisp December morning, 6 months after Walter's death, Emma arrived at the diner before dawn to prepare for a special event. The renovations were complete, and today marked the official reopening. She moved through the familiar space, touching countertops and booth backs like old friends. The bell above the door chimed as Max entered, stamping snow from his boots. Big day, he commented, heading for the coffee machine. Nervous, Emma admitted. What if no one comes? Max chuckled, the sound warming the quiet diner. They'll come. People in this town understand loyalty. He was right. As the morning progressed, Sunrise Diner filled with customers old and new. Frank Sullivan claimed his usual spot at the counter, newspaper in hand. The construction workers arrived in a boisterous group, admiring the renovations while insisting nothing important had changed. Even Diana seemed pleased with the updates, though she'd never admit it outright. At precisely 7:15, the door opened again. Catherine Bishop entered, elegant in a camel hair coat, looking around with curious eyes. It was her first visit to the diner since their initial confrontation, a deliberate crossing of boundaries between her world and Emma's. Miss Porter, she nodded, removing leather gloves. I hope I'm not intruding on your celebration. Not at all, Emma welcomed her. Would you like some coffee? Booth 5 is available. Something like understanding passed between them as Catherine settled into Walter's booth, gazing out the same window that had framed his view for over a year. Emma brought coffee in the diner's classic heavy white mug, setting it before her with professional grace. I see why he came here, Catherine said after a moment. There's an honesty to this place. That's what Walter valued most in his final years, Emma agreed. Honesty, simplicity, human connection. Catherine sipped her coffee, her expression thoughtful. The board approved the expanded funding for the Legacy Foundation yesterday. The employee ownership program is moving forward as well. George Marshall is proving a more forceful CEO than I expected. Walter would be pleased, Emma said. Not just about the business decisions, but about you and Nathan finding peace. Yes, Catherine agreed, though I sometimes wonder if Walter orchestrated all of this as his final act of strategy. Not vengeance this time, but reconciliation. Emma considered this, remembering the complex web of evidence in Walter's study, the decades of calculated moves. I think Walter hoped for redemption for everyone, including Nathan. He left him $10 million after all. Enough to start over. Nathan told me about your conversation, Catherine said. It meant something to him. The diner hummed with conversation and clinking silverware around them, a bubble of normal life continuing, unaware of the significant exchange occurring in Booth 5. Emma felt a sense of completion, of circles closing and new ones beginning. Will you stay for breakfast? She asked Catherine. The special is pretty good today. Catherine hesitated, then nodded. Why not? Walter always said the food here was exceptional. It is, Emma smiled, and I'll even cut your toast if your hands are shaking. Catherine laughed, a genuine sound that drew glances from nearby tables, unaccustomed to such warmth from the imperious woman. I think I can manage my own toast, but I appreciate the offer. As Emma returned to the kitchen to place Catherine's order, she paused at the counter, taking in the scene before her. Sunrise Diner pulsed with life and conversation, a microcosm of community that Walter had recognized and valued. His final gift wasn't just the property or the money, it was this moment, this continuation of something genuine in a world often governed by artifice. That evening after closing, Emma sat alone in booth 5 with her sketchbook open before her. For the first time in years, she felt the creative energy flowing freely, her pencil capturing the essence of the diner and its occupants with confident strokes. Walter's face emerged on the page, not the stern businessman from the boardroom portrait, but the quiet man with trembling hands who had found peace in a corner booth. A motorcycle rumbled outside, then fell silent. Moments later, Mason entered, snow-dusting his leather jacket and beard. "Thought you might still be here," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Old habits die hard." "Just finishing something?" Emma showed him the sketch. "What do you think capturing his essence?" Mason studied the drawing, nodding slowly. "That's how he really was. Not how the world saw him, but how he was inside." He reached into his jacket, removing a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Found this in Walter's studio. Thought you should have it." Emma unwrapped the package carefully. Inside was a small, exquisite painting of Sunrise Diner at dawn, light spilling through the windows, illuminating a young woman pouring coffee with an expression of gentle determination. Walter had captured something essential about her, something Emma herself hadn't recognized until now. "He completed it the week before he died," Mason explained. "Said it was his final work." Tears blurred Emma's vision as she traced the brushstrokes, feeling Walter's presence in each one. "Thank you, Mason." He nodded, understanding the depth of her gratitude extended beyond the painting. Walter used to say that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in moments of genuine connection. Mason rose to leave, pausing at the booth's edge. "By that measure, you made him a wealthy man in his final year." After Mason departed, Emma remained in the quiet diner, Walter's painting propped against the salt and pepper shakers. Outside, snow fell gently over Millridge, covering the worn edges and faded signs, with pristine white offering the promise of renewal. Emma Porter, once a waitress with abandoned dreams, now found herself the unlikely guardian of multiple legacies, the diner that provided community, the foundation that offered opportunity, the truth that had saved a company, and most importantly, the simple human kindness that had touched a wounded old man and in doing so had changed everything. In the corner of the painting beside Walter's distinctive signature, he had written a single line: "Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the largest ripples." Emma closed her sketchbook, Walter's painting tucked carefully inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The foundation required guidance. The diner needed her attention. Her art was calling once more. But tonight, in this moment of quiet reflection, Emma felt Walter's approval, like a gentle hand on her shoulder, confirmation that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She switched off the lights, the diner's neon sign still glowing through the falling snow, a beacon of welcome in the winter night. As Emma locked the door behind her, she glanced back at booth 5, imagining Walter there with his newspaper and coffee, watching the world with observant eyes. "Good night, Walter," she whispered, then turned toward home, her footprints in the snow marking the beginning of a path entirely her own.